about that. But right now, we welcome in a friend of the show, friend of mine for many years, Roger Stone, a political consultant and strategist and author of a great new book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ. Hello, Roger.
Steve, great to be with you.
Well, it's always great to talk to you. So, before we get, we got plenty of time here, so we'll save the election analysis for a little later. But so, are we to imply by the title that LBJ was behind the murder of JFK?
Absolutely. I believe that Lyndon Johnson had unique motive, means, and opportunity to kill John F. Kennedy. I believe that he was the linchpin of a plot that included others, such as the Central Intelligence Agency, organized crime, and Texas Oil. He had unique relations with all three of them, and I think to use a Latin axiom, it goes "Cui prodest seclus est fict." If you want to know who committed the crime, look at who derives the greatest benefit.
All right, now
Johnson is the one.
And okay, well, obviously deriving the biggest benefit of being elevated to the Oval Office, but you also talk about in the book that if this is the case, you say this would not be the first time that Lyndon Johnson had people killed. In fact, he had done it quite a number of times prior to the assassination of JFK.
That's correct. I tie him to at least 8 murders on the way up. Murders to cover up epic corruption. I mean, just corruption of biblical proportions. Murders to cover up electoral theft of the 1948 Senate election, which he stole, by 87 fraudulent votes. Johnson was a killer, and murder was in his repertoire. Ironically, one of the cases I make is the man I believe shot President Kennedy, at least one of the shooters, is a man named Malcolm Wallace. His fingerprint is found in the sniper's nest in the Texas School Book Depository building on the 6th floor. I believe that he is also the murderer of a long succession of Johnson problems. I think he is Lyndon Johnson's personal hitman. And I tie him in the book irrevocably to Johnson. Malcolm Mac Wallace, I believe, is at least one of the shooters on that fateful day.
All right, now you say one of the shooters. That's another thing, but I wanted to also talk about Jack Ruby. We'll get to him in a second, but you say one of the shooters. So obviously you believe that there was more than one shooter. There have been so much has come out where that theory has been dispelled by experts, and videos have come out. But so how many shooters do you believe there were, and was Oswald one of them?
Well, here I guess is the key point, and that is I believe Kennedy was shot from both the front and the back. I think that there is more evidence that shows that than evidence that bolsters the Warren Commission's absurd conclusion that there were only 3 shots and they were from the front. Asking the Warren Commission to investigate the assassination of Kennedy, asking J. Edgar Hoover to investigate the assassination of Kennedy is like asking John Gotti to investigate a mob hit. The government was investigating itself. But I think that the wounds, the testimony of the Parkland doctors, the suspicious activity surrounding the autopsy, I believe that there were probably at least 2 shooters. There may have been 3. 51 witnesses told us that they saw a puff of smoke, a flash of light from the so-called grassy knoll. Of course, none of that got into the Warren Commission report. There may have been another shooter in the Daltex building. There's some evidence to that effect. But there most definitely was a plot to kill Kennedy. I don't like the word conspiracy because, you see, any critic of the government, they call you a conspiracy theorist.
All right, well,
That's not a compliment.
Okay, but maybe I understand. We're talking to Roger Stone, the new book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ. Now, you talk about you don't like the word conspiracy, but you also mention in the book about the Warren Commission, and you imply a cover-up, at least, if not a conspiracy outright there. Arlen Specter allegedly threatening people who said that they heard more than 3 shots. Gerald Ford on that commission, you say altering autopsy reports, and it goes, on and on and on. Even George H.W. Bush said he couldn't remember where he was on November 22nd, and that he had no ties to the CIA prior to becoming director. So, I mean, are all these people, if in fact all these things happen, are you implying that, let me ask you this, why would they cover up? Do you believe they knew what happened or not?
Well, I think that there's 2 different levels. Johnson created a myth that the assassination of John Kennedy was carried out by the Russians. It was an international conspiracy, he told Earl Warren. So he implied that we had to have this cover story or it would precipitate World War III. There's no evidence whatsoever that the Russians or the Cubans were responsible for John Kennedy's death. So Gerald Ford alters the autopsy evidence, for example, at the direction of J. Edgar Hoover to accommodate the government's cockamamie single bullet theory, where a bullet hit Kennedy, then hits Governor John Connally, then changes direction again. Simply not possible. In essence, the Warren Commission made their conclusion, and then they tried to cut and paste the evidence to fit a preordained conclusion.
And finally, Jackie Kennedy had said, I believe, that she never trusted LBJ, and you write that she had asked the French intelligence to determine who killed her husband, and they came to the conclusion, as I believe for what it's worth, the KGB investigation came to the conclusion that LBJ was behind it. Correct?
That is correct. Jackie Kennedy asked the French intelligence to investigate, and they published their report. It's called Farewell America. Jackie Kennedy asked the French intelligence to investigate, and they published their report. It's called Farewell America. They're going to get blamed, they or their puppet state Cuba. They published an 81-page report that indicated Lyndon Johnson was the perp. Barry Goldwater believed that Johnson killed Kennedy. Jack Ruby blurted it out. He was never allowed to talk to the press, but when he was walking down the corridor in handcuffs, a reporter yells out, Jack, how did this happen? And Ruby says, look at the very top. They say, what do you mean, Jack? He said, if Adlai Stevenson were vice president, this never would have happened. Are you saying it was Lyndon Johnson, Jack? He said, look at the man at the very top. To me, that is Lyndon Johnson.
And finally, what about the connection between Johnson and Jack Ruby?
Nixon told me directly, and there was actual documentary evidence that in 1947, and said, this is Jack Ruby, he's an associate of Lyndon Johnson. Johnson would like you to put him on the House payroll, and said, this is Jack Ruby, he's an associate of Lyndon Johnson. Johnson would like you to put him on the House payroll. Of Chicago, that's Jack Ruby at the time, was put on the House of Representatives payroll by Congressman Richard Nixon. So when Nixon saw Ruby blow Oswald away on national TV, he immediately understood that Oswald was being silenced by a man associated with both organized crime and Lyndon Johnson. Johnson was taking $55,000 a month in a bribe from Carlos Marcello, the mob boss of Texas and Louisiana, to cover up, or I should say to protect their illegal gambling operations. It's also interesting, Steve, that the day Lyndon Johnson became president, all of the Department of Justice wiretaps on organized crime that had been put in place by Attorney General Robert Kennedy were terminated by orders of the President of the United States, Lyndon Johnson.
I got to tell you, there are a lot of books out there on this issue. This is fascinating. I mean, just what I've talked about with you is just the tip of the iceberg, and there's more goodies, as I like to refer to them, in there that's going to keep you turning the pages on this. You think you've heard it all. You think you know who killed Kennedy, and you think you even think maybe you're sick of hearing about it. I'm telling you, this book is going to change all that, because this isn't the typical. This is very fascinating with lots of accusations and lots of facts written by Roger Stone to back it all up. So the man who killed Kennedy, the case against LBJ. Now, before I let you go, of course, your expertise as as a political consultant and campaign organizer and people who've run successful campaigns. What do you make of well, first of all, let's start just we have a couple of minutes, but in New York, what on earth? I mean, the voting turnout in New York City was 25%. I think it's the lowest it's been in decades and decades and decades. What on earth lulled New Yorkers into the complacency that they could either stay home or come out and pull the lever 3-1 for a guy who is going to undo all the good that is economically, safety-wise, that has been done in this city since David Dinkins left office? What's going on here?
Yeah, I think two things. One, frankly, things have been good in New York for so long. The city has been safe. The city's been economically fairly strong. It's had a good job market. It's been a good place to live for so long. People have forgotten. Many people who voted yesterday didn't even live in New York City when David Dinkins was at the top. So they don't remember the filthy streets. They don't remember the lack of jobs. They don't remember a murder rate out of control.
The squeegee man, the squeegee man.
The squeegee man, the worst schools in America.
Yeah.
They don't remember any of that. And therefore, when you tell them you're going to be going backwards, they have no frame of reference. They don't know what backwards is.
Well,
things are great. How could they possibly go wrong? Secondarily, when the pollsters in the New York Times keeps telling you over and over and over again, Joe Biden's 50 points behind. He's 50 points behind. What are they saying? They're saying this election's over.
Right.
Don't bother coming out to vote.
Right.
There's no reason to vote. De Blasio's going to win. And then lastly, let's just look at the topography. 8 out of 10 people in New York City are liberals.
Yep.
7 out of 10 are Democrats.
I know. I mean, it didn't stop Bloomberg and Giuliani, although Bloomberg switched a couple of times. But I want to squeeze.
The city was a very different place then, and therefore, the white blue-collar Catholic vote in the outer boroughs has really receded. The numbers were very different the last time Mike Bloomberg was on the ballot.
All right, quickly, Roger, we got a minute, less than a minute. Give me your take on the Christie win and where his political future lies. Rand Paul just told me he's a moderate, and it'll be very hard for him to win Republican primaries.
Big win. I noticed that he's calling himself conservative. As you know, he is pro-life. He is at least philosophically opposed to gay marriage. I think it will be a tougher time for him to be nominated than be elected. It is interesting to me, though, in all of the polling, he's the only Republican who runs within hailing distance of Hillary Clinton. He's right on Hillary Clinton's tail. I like Rand Paul myself a lot, but I have not seen a poll yet that shows him in a competitive situation in the general election.
I'll give you my prediction. Christie loses the nomination, and then Hillary picks him as the VP candidate. And I've been saying that for about a year now. Anyway, gotta go. Good luck with the book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, Roger Stone. We're coming back. Steve Malzberg Show, Newsmax TV and radio.